Hello, and welcome back to I Have Anxiety. If you are joining us for the first time, my name is Courtney, and just a quick recap of what this show is and isn't about. Disclaimer, I am in no way a medical or mental health professional. I am just somebody who deals with anxiety, and I wanted to share my experience of defying my anxiety and moving past these things that limit me, these negative thoughts, and all that type of stuff, and really just take you on a journey with me as I become the best version of myself, acknowledging the fact that I struggle with anxiety. So, if you've watched my first two episodes, thank you for returning. I really appreciate the support in any way that you're giving it to me. Please continue to leave comments. Please continue to view the show. If there's anything specific you want me to talk about, if there's anything that you'd like me to elaborate on, if there's something you don't like, I'm open to suggestions, healthy criticism, all these types of things. So please feel free to make your voice heard in the comments. I truly appreciate all the interaction that I can get. So, like I said, I'm not a medical professional. This show is not about learning about anxiety specifically. It's really about learning how to defy your anxiety. Not even necessarily learning how, but feeling support in the fact that somebody else is consistently every day experiencing thoughts and feelings and emotions and stressors that you're feeling that may seem out of the ordinary or extra or dramatic to some people who don't experience the same type of emotions. It's not dramatic. It's okay. You're not the only one. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be vulnerable for you because talking about these things is very difficult. Not everybody can do it. And so I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about my moments, and I'm going to talk about ways that I am moving beyond it and insisting that I improve my own quality of life. So, starting today with just kind of what my last few days have looked like. So I filmed my last episode on the 6th. Today is January 12th. So I've had some time in between, about a week now since I've actually sat down to the camera and filmed another episode. So I'm just gonna kind of take you through my last few days, and then we're gonna go through some words that I would like to discuss. If you haven't been with us before, I love words. I love the spoken word in general. I will be going over terminology that is important to me in my process. And so I will always give the definitions first, and then we'll talk about what I'm doing to try to either implement these things in my own life or why it's something I feel like I need to work on in my own life in general. So, since my last episode, I've made some major decisions in life that right now I'm not going to disclose because we talked about having private goals and certain things like that in the last episode. And so there's some things that I'm not going to go into great detail in today, but I made some major changes, and so far I still feel good about them. I'm kind of worried that in the next few days it's all gonna set in and I'm gonna start being like, was this the right choice and all that type of stuff. But I'm trying to just ignore those preemptive feelings, right? Because right now, to be honest, I am feeling really at peace about my decision. And so I'm trying to ignore those preemptive feelings. I'm gonna go with the flow. I'm gonna continue to be consistent in making choices that better this decision, and eventually I'll share that piece with you once we've gotten to a certain point, whether it turns out the way I want it to or not, because the most important part about this outlet is vulnerability and transparency. And so I don't want to be keeping things in because I think that defies the entire purpose of me doing this. But at the same time, I do think it's important to, like I said, make private goals and kind of center yourself before you involve other people in all of your business. So that's what I'm doing right now. So with the fact that I made some major changes, I also still a major change, but I also started on a path towards some goals that I've had for a very long time. And it was a lot easier to start on that path. We discussed the fact that I don't necessarily consider myself a bulldozer when it comes to making changes in life. And about for the past week now, I've been trying to live in that just a little bit because I do feel like sometimes when it comes to starting things, that's just kind of how that can be very helpful. It may not be the best format for consistency for everybody. Like some people need to be able to, like, okay, so you might need contingencies for your goals. You might need checkpoints, you might need this, you might need that, and that's okay. But I am trying out the format of just going for it when it comes to certain things because I do have a tendency to overthink. I can psych myself out a lot. And so I think that if I dwell on a topic, dwell on a thought for, a few days to a week, then I'm just going to go ahead and try it. And that's not a promise to myself or anybody else that everything's going to work out. That doesn't mean I'm always going to be able to keep up the pace with everything that I start, but that does mean that I get comfortable with doing the things, right? And the things that work, I will keep up with. Everything doesn't work. Every idea that comes to your mind is not going to be golden. And I think that's important to remember. But that doesn't mean don't give it a try. Because if you don't try, then you're teaching yourself to never try. And so even the ones that really were golden, even the ones that had all the potential in the world, and that if you had just stepped out on faith, you would have probably seen a miraculous result. You never get there if you never try any of it. And half of the things that you're going to try are probably not going to work at first. And so it's just important to get in the habit of do it anyway, which is something we talked about in the last episode. So even if it doesn't seem to be working in its perfect, it doesn't seem to be working out exactly how you wanted, or if you're unsure, get started. Go ahead. Don't be afraid. Just give it a shot. And you may have to re-rock it. You may have to make some changes. You might realize, you know what, this sounded like fun, but it's really not for me. But that's okay because you still learned something about yourself, which means that it wasn't a waste of time. It's only a waste of time if you didn't grow from it in any way, shape, or form. And so as long as you didn't waste your time, you didn't waste your life, and you didn't fail. So that's all that matters, is that you are getting something out of the choices that you're making. And it may not always be the result that you're going for, but we have to remember that there's nothing we can do about that sometimes. It's really not always up to us, and we have to move forward anyway and let the negative thoughts just glaze by, because there's not always promise that you can get rid of them. The point of this is defying them, because you can't necessarily control your thoughts, but you can teach yourself to think other ways. But that takes time. It's a muscle. You have to develop it. We'll get there. So, like I said, I've made some major changes, started on a path with some goals. I'm really, really excited about some of this stuff that I've started working on. And so, once again, they're part of the things that I'm not going to 100% disclose at the moment. Some of them, the closest people in my life do know. There's a couple things that not everybody knows, but one of the changes I made in life, most of the people who I'm close to know already. And then one of the things only one person knows. And at the moment, I'm going to keep things status quo. I'm not going to disclose any more than that, simply because I want to work on my own focus without outside energy. And like I said, we talked about private goals last week. And sometimes, and I do want to come back to that a little bit, because I want to stress the fact that you're not keeping a secret, okay? And I'm stressing that because that's how I feel sometimes when I keep private goals. I feel like I'm keeping a secret, because if I'm working on my goals and I'm doing what I'm supposed to and I'm being consistent, that means they're governing my time, right? And so sometimes people will ask you to do things. People will ask you to go places. They'll want to talk on the phone, do this, do that. They may want you to do something that goes against what you're working on right now. And so you're not keeping a secret. You have a private goal. Privacy is important, and you're allowed to be private. If you practice a faith like I do, and I've disclosed that as well, I'm a Christian. My goals are allowed to be between myself and God, if that's where I feel like I am at the moment. You don't have to tell everybody everything, and that doesn't mean you're being dishonest. And anybody who stresses you about sharing your business all the time, they're probably not that healthy for you. So take that into consideration, because not everything is for everybody to know. And once things start churning out results, They're going to see it anyway. And when they go, well, why didn't you tell me? Because I don't have to. That's an actual answer. And anybody who makes you feel bad about that, just remember that you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for you. Even if, because they're a loved one, they end up reaping the benefits of your good decisions and your success, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. You're becoming a more stable person because it gives you a more stable life, because it allows you to smile on the regular basis. And that's what we're after here, right? We're after true internal happiness, true internal growth, and hopefully some financial success, some familial success, success in all areas, healthier relationships, more money if that's something that you're going for, longer hair, clearer skin, whatever it is that you're going for. Making these internal changes, the point is to bring about positive change in your own life. And so it's crazy, but don't feel like it's not crazy. Let me switch that. It's not crazy. Don't feel like you are being dishonest or secretive or withholding because you're not ready to talk about a goal that you have right now. You're not. And I'm telling this to myself as much as I'm telling it to you, because it's something that I'm dealing with right now. Because to be honest, I like sharing. And it's not because I like bragging. It's because I used to be one of those people who thought that if I shared, it made me more likely to continue something because now I've put responsibility on it. And the truth about it is, it doesn't. It really does not help me hold myself to a standard anymore. But honest to God, it doesn't. And so, but however, it does put stress on me. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So finding a healthy place to know what you're doing without needing other people's approval is very important, and it rolls into one of the topics that we're going to talk about today. So I'm glad I said that. But so a good week, to be honest. I've had still dealing with some emotional stressors, some emotional turmoil. Still not every decision I've made this week was my best moment in life, but that's okay. Being able to understand that I can make decisions that didn't make me so happy and make decisions that did make me happy, and realizing that regardless, I still did a good job, because for one, I can acknowledge the fact that I made decisions that may not have been my best decisions. I did things that weren't my best moments. And that's fine, because that's going to happen every week. That's really going to happen every day. You're not going to go through a 24 hours where everything you did was just stellar. It's not going to happen, because we're not perfect. So being able to accept those moments, move on from them, learn from them, not worry about them, because some stuff is really minute enough to just let it roll off, and understand that somebody else probably made the same mistake. That is important. Having that mindset in itself is a win. So not letting decisions that weren't your best, that didn't necessarily highlight your best intentions, being able to come to the conclusion that those decisions are what they are, living your truth and move on, that in itself is a muscle that has to be nurtured, it has to be trained, and it's an extremely important one, because it's your ability to not beat up on yourself for no apparent reason. Because we all do things and make choices that just really aren't good for us. And as long as we learn from them and we're not consistently over and over and over again making the exact same mistakes all the time, doing the same wrong thing over and over again, it's worth messing up, because you're gonna do something wrong anyway. So you might as well do something you can learn from. So as long as you take that moment, make sure that you are noticing these things. Where the problem comes in is when you're doing things that aren't good for you and you're not noticing them, or you're ignoring them because they're a comfort zone for you. Don't do that. Don't be like, well, I know I shouldn't, but I'm gonna. No, because at the point where you're accepting it, now that's something else, right? That's not just making a bad decision. That's choosing to live in a lesser version of yourself. And we're not accepting that from ourselves anymore, right? We've all done it, but we're doing better. We're stepping beyond that. We're saying, if you know this is something that you do that you just need to stop doing, and you're well aware of the fact that it's not good for you, we are no longer accepting that from ourselves. Sometimes you have to convict yourself, and that's okay. I know it can be difficult to do because our minds convict us enough, right? as a person with anxiety, you can feel convicted about the dumbest things, okay? You can feel convicted about the fact that you took a pen from the office. No one knows you took that pen from the office. No one knows. No one cares. They are ordering supplies tomorrow anyway. They don't care. No one knows. They don't care. But sometimes irrational conviction, irrational feelings come along. Well, not sometimes. They come along with anxiety. It's part of it. And so you have to be able to separate your irrational convictions from the ones that you really need to focus on. Because in order to properly grow in those areas, you have to be able to push aside the stuff that is ridiculous. Don't worry about the pen. Don't worry about the fact that you didn't do something completely perfect today. That's fine. What's not fine is the stuff that you've been doing forever that you know you do and you have not taken the time to address. That's the stuff that's not fine. This is what we're working on. You're imperfect. That's fine. This stuff right here, though, the things that are defining your life, the things that are holding you up, the things that you know you do, fix them. This is what you need to work on. These are the things that you isolate, you pay attention to, you analyze, you get to the root of the problem, and you deal with. And with that, I would like to talk about my therapy session last week. So in the first episode, I mentioned that I do attend therapy. I brought it up with the point that I did not self-diagnose with anxiety. I think it's really important that if you are having anxious feelings on a regular basis and you feel like it's more than your average person, don't just self-diagnose. And I say don't self-diagnose because, for one, mental health issues, mental illness comes in all shapes and forms, and anxiety is kind of a baseline for a lot of them. So you really want to make sure that you're not battling something else, because they come in different levels and you never really know what you're dealing with. So if you are feeling exponentially anxious, please seek help. I know sometimes it can be a chore, it can be a financial concern, but find a way. There are avenues. I will try to look some up and see if I can figure out a way to put some information down there if that's something that's a concern. But please look into it. It has made a world of difference for me to go ahead and take that leap to actually go see a professional. And I didn't do it because I didn't want to have a problem. I didn't want to feel like I was crazy. You're not crazy. You're going to drive yourself crazy avoiding the therapist. Trust me. I did it. So don't drive yourself crazy avoiding the therapist. Go to therapy. It makes a difference. It's not a light switch. It's a process. But go. You will see a difference. With that, now we need to talk about the topics that I wanted to discuss. So my first therapy session of 2026 was on January 7th. My therapist took like the last 2 weeks of 2025 and she was off, which I was completely fine with. She gave everybody plenty of time, plenty of notice. I was actually very happy for her. I think that all professions need to be able to have their boundaries. So I actually loved that, because as my therapist, someone who talks to me about having boundaries, if she didn't exemplify any boundaries, that would kind of be, it would be interesting. So I'm glad that she does. So I didn't meet with her again until the 7th. And so that's the first session I've had since I've started speaking to you lovely people. And so I went in my first session of the year with very specific goals for the year. And it's a different approach than I've ever taken during any other session. So usually during my sessions, like, she'll kind of ask me, is there anything I'm coming in with today, right? Basically, is there anything specific that I would like to talk about? And in the past, if I didn't have an experience or emotional issue that I was specifically dealing with, like if I wasn't hurt in a specific way, or even if I wasn't overly excited about anything in particular, I would kind of just say no, and I would let her direct the session, which very helpful. I actually enjoy those sessions. I feel like we get to dig into things that I may be a little less surface aware of, which is really what you want, because you really do want to get to the things that you're not seeing, because the stuff that you're seeing is the stuff that you're probably more likely to deal with. It's the stuff that you're not that's really defining the things, and it's probably the cause for some of the stuff that you're seeing. So you have to get down in there in order to be able to resolve those problems anyway. So I enjoy those sessions, but this time I did come in with something, and it was because, like I had expressed in previous episodes, I was kind of dealing with the situation. And if you go back and watch episode 1, I kind of admit that it was slightly self-inflicted, but at the same time, it just it was what it was. It was affecting me heavily, and I still deal with it in moments. Life's not a light switch. I'm not over it. It is what it is. But I'm in a much better place about it. And it's because I realized a few things about myself. Nothing that we hadn't talked about in therapy already, but I realized the weight of them. Because it's one thing to notice something, it's one thing to be told, this is an example of X, Y, and Z. It's another thing to have a moment of self-awareness and realize how heavy weighted that issue is for you. To realize that it's not just something you do here and there, to realize it's really a defining factor in a lot of your issues. So we're going to start with codependency. It's an ugly word. I hate it. I hated it the first time she said it. And I knew it was true then, and I know it's true now. So codependency is one of the things that I asked for her to really focus in on me with this year. In the near future specifically. We don't need to zero in on it the whole year. I'm hoping it doesn't take me an entire year to deal with my codependency issues. But if it does, we're not rushing it. We want to be healthy. But I really want to zero in on that. And I want to zero in on it because I've gotten to the point where, for me, it's debilitating. And that's a really tough word to use for something like that, but it truly is. So, like promised, I'm always going to give you the definition of something that I know is not necessarily a word getting used in everyday life. So codependency is an unhealthy relationship pattern where one person excessively focuses on others' needs, often neglecting their own to feel valuable, frequently enabling self-destructive behaviors like addiction or immaturity. So this is a rabbit hole for me because I exhibit codependency in most areas of my life when we're talking about relationships, which really sucks because it's not intentional, right? I think I lump codependency with loyalty, and I have not done a good job of finding the dividing line between loyal and where it becomes codependent. So I expressed in the first episode that maintaining friendships is something that has always been difficult for me. And so as time went on, I found different ways to alter myself to what I thought was more appealing for friendships and relationships in general. Even as a kid growing up in a household with kind of strict parents, as I watched my older siblings get in trouble and deal with this and, get their phone taken for that, I conformed. I made decisions specifically to stay out of trouble. I made decisions specifically to ensure that my parents were always pleased. It had nothing to do with what I wanted to do. It had nothing to do with the fact that I am allowed to make mistakes. It had nothing to do with the fact that I thought I didn't deserve to do certain things. My first boyfriend, I had my first boyfriend when I was 14, I believe. I was in the 10th grade. I started school a year early, so I was in the 10th grade, but I was 14 years old. And I remember, we had been hanging out at school, we've been texting and stuff, and he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes. And one day, and once I had said yes, he was like, so hey, let's, you want to go out this weekend? And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure if I'm actually allowed to have a boyfriend. I like you, but this might have to be a school thing. And he was like, he's like, I mean, we're in high school. Have you ever asked? And I hadn't. I didn't ask. And so I said no. And he was like, you should ask. And I did. And what do you know? They had no problem with it. They were like, fine. You know, have them come to the house. We'll meet them. You guys can go to the mall. Fine. And it was perfectly fine. It wasn't even, I cannot tell you how anxious I was to ask my parents if I was allowed to have a boyfriend. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Like I was doing something wrong. Everybody dates. 14, 10th grade, that's pretty normal to start dating. I was so nervous. I thought I was going to be in trouble just for the notion. And that was because there was a lot of pressure in my household about the whole boy thing. And understandable, generational trauma. These things happen. We'll get into that in another episode. But it wasn't like I didn't understand my parents' standpoint. It was just the fact that I was so concerned with staying out of trouble that I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to press that envelope. But what that did was it put me at a disadvantage. I was sacrificing my own happiness. I was sacrificing my own growth and experience because dating is a part of life. It's a milestone. It's a part of growing up. I was, siphoning my own growth because I was concerned about disappointing my parents. But why would they be disappointed because I liked a boy? Completely irrational. But that was how I felt. And I have made decisions like that my entire life. And I often require a push. But the problem is there's not always somebody to push you, especially when you're talking about building future success for your life. Things that will really propel you into the lifestyle, into the person you want to be, you will generally have to be able to talk yourself into them. You have to be able to be your own cheerleader. You have to be able to be self-motivated. And this need to please other people that turned into me not moving unless I was certain that somebody else would be okay with the movement, it has stifled me in a lot of ways in life. And it sucks because at 29 years old, I have come to the realization that it's not, the way my therapist put it for me was that I have traded in being, I'm not just being nice, right? I'm not just doing what's right. I'm people pleasing, basically. My concern is always what other people want. And it's interesting because I know there are people who would watch this and say I'm not like that at all. I'm completely different than that. And I can guarantee that the experiences that those people are talking about are probably within the last 5 years. That's somewhere along the lines where I began to crack. And I know 5 years sounds like a long time to take to crack. But when you have to consider the fact that I'm almost 30 years old, and when I tell you this has been who I am my entire life, this was not a thin layer that needed to crack. This was my entire being that had to split and decide that this was no longer a healthy format of life. I have talked about the fact that I love school, and that's very true. I would be a professional student if I could. I have said it in now every episode because I mean it. And some of that comes from the fact that I equate school with an escape. I equate school with, if I put the work in, I get the win out. And as somebody who has a hard time with pushing forward when I get disappointed, a setup where all I have to do is my best and I will get what I'm going for is very addicting to me. So school is an easy thing for me to love because as long as I do my part, I get what I want out of it, and life is not always like that. So it really is something that can become very addictive for me. And it's not the worst thing to be addicted to, so most people don't see it that way. But the concept of learning something new all the time makes it hard for you to become a master at anything. So it can have a downside. But with that, um, once again, and I hate to continue to use my childhood as an example because, and this is something I also deal with in therapy. Always feel the need to preface statements about my childhood with the fact that I have wonderful parents. I had a great childhood overall. My parents are like any other person on the planet. They are imperfect, and they did their best. And my parents did more than most people will ever see a parent do for them. So please bear that in mind as I explain the things that I went through growing up. And tell me if I'm, you know, exhibiting some behavior here, because I mean, it's the truth though. I always feel the need to preface topics about my childhood with the fact that my parents are wonderful people. So, anywho, um, going to college from an early age was a goal for me. But to be honest, the primary goal of going to college had nothing to do with a career. My reason for wanting to go to college from an early age was getting out of the house. I knew I was smart enough to understand that directly graduating from high school, whatever job I got immediately, the likelihood of it paying enough for me to go live on my own was slim to none. But college, going away to college, living on campus, it meant that I got to leave my parents' house. And I wanted to do that more than anything. And it shaped a lot of the decisions I made. Um, it shaped the way I dealt with boys, for one. I did lose my virginity in high school, but I was not, you couldn't pay me to not use a condom in high school. You couldn't. Now, mind you, I only slept with one person in high school. Same, my one boyfriend that I had, well, I had a couple of boyfriends in high school, but the one that convinced me to actually ask my parents if I was allowed to go out in public with him, he's the only person I had sex with in high school. And you could not pay me to have sex without a condom in high school. You could not pay me to allow you to come in the condom in me in high school. You couldn't do it. I don't care if the condom's on. You have to come out. And that's because both of my sisters had kids at younger ages. They were both 18. But my parents loved their grandkids day in and day out, helped my sisters with everything they needed. But I had conversations with my sisters, and I was in that house. It did reshape their lives. And so I was concerned about extending my time under my parents' thumb. I didn't want to do it. And so to me, no baby meant no extension of time under their thumb. This is a good thing. I'm not saying that not having unprotected sex in high school was a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. It was a great thing. It was one of the best things I've ever done in life. What I am saying is that my reasoning for making these what really were healthy decisions still watered an unhealthy concept, because everything I was doing was an escape route, and everything I was doing was in the fashion of I cannot piss my parents off. And that may not sound like the worst concept in the world, but when you spend all of your developmental years making your choices solely based on escape and acceptance, that's all you know how to do. And even when I talk about things in my life that bring me comfort, that bring me peace, pretty much all of them align with the idea that I get to escape when I am ready. And that's because I've spent my life making choices based on whether or not somebody else was going to be happy with it. And in the spare moments when I didn't, it produced as anger because it had festered for so long and it blew up, but I didn't ever make a permanent change. I exploded, and then everything dried, and I kept doing the same thing over and over again. I never made any changes. I just kept exploding and resurfacing. That's not helping. So I don't near about have all the answers for what I know is a serious problem I have with codependency. But it is changing this year. Now, it's non-negotiable. It has become debilitating. And I can't take it anymore. So, yeah. Next concept, willpower. This one is also a really big one for me because it is essential to meeting goals in life, to pushing forward, to becoming the person you want. You have to have the ability to do it on your own fruition. So, definition of willpower is the mental strength to control your own actions, emotions, and impulses to achieve long-term goals. Boom. Perfect. Like I said before, I get disappointed easily, which means that sometimes longevity in keeping up with a process, consistency, which I've talked about a million times at this point, is difficult for me if I'm not seeing any type of results, which is why sometimes when I set up my own goals, when I set up my own path, I install checkpoints. There's nothing wrong with that. Being able to know what you need to succeed is pertinent. Do it how you need to do it to get it done. But the point is, you need to build up a form of a portion of willpower. You have to have it, really a lot of it, if we're being real, not just a portion. You need to have it. And for me personally, it's something that I have not been good at. And that's simply because, for one, a lot of the things that were a lot of the things that were considered important in life for me early on really didn't require a lot from me. Like I said, education was such a big thing in my life growing up, and school was never difficult for me. So, it didn't seem like it didn't take much. So I didn't really build up any willpower, because being able to do things that come naturally doesn't take as much willpower. And it's the things that, well, not when you're younger anyway. This type of stuff, communication, really getting to the root of the way people are, and standing in other people's shoes and talking about the stuff that doesn't come to everyone's mind, it really does come naturally to me. What doesn't come naturally to me, though, is letting everybody hear me do it, right? It comes naturally to me when I'm sitting by myself watching a deep rooted movie, a drama, a psychological thriller, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know exactly why this is happening. I love that kind of informative feeling, those informative conversations, but it's the ability to use it in a fashion that separates me from just somebody who likes things as a hobby, and somebody who feels like they actually have a voice and enough to say to where I should be sharing this, which I talked about in the first episode too, it goes back to the fact that I struggle with sharing my gifts. And so having the willpower to just work on that portion. Work on the portion that says keep keep sharing. Keep doing it. You may not feel like sharing today because you may not be in your best format today, but share anyway. Because if I'm being totally transparent, I didn't necessarily feel like recording today. I haven't felt like recording for the last couple of days, but it's not because I didn't want to continue the show. And that's what made me realize you're just hitting a bump. Consistency is something you're working on. Willpower is something you're working on. Get up and do it. It's not because you don't want to do it. And I know sometimes that's also an area that can be difficult. When you get to a point where you are not in the mood, sometimes you question whether or not you really want to do something. That's not what it is. Sometimes it's what it is. I'm not going to tell you that you want to do everything that you don't feel like doing. But when it's something that you've put your mind to and when it's something that makes you feel good, that lack of energy, for one, can stem from the fact that consistency and willpower are muscles. You have to keep pressing. It's impulse to come home from work and want to relax. That's what it is. But that's not what's going to get you to where you want, especially if your job is not what you want to do. You have to have the ability to press past it. And it's a struggle for me. It's a struggle for me for so many reasons, but I think it's a struggle for me because I've been unhappy in my day-to-day life for so long that it almost seems pointless to me sometimes to do things when I have no reason to believe that it's going to pan out. You get home and you're like, well, what's the point? I've spent all day doing something I don't want to do. And now all I really want to do is rest. But if you take every opportunity of rest, you won't get the stuff that matters to you done. Because you're right, it's unfair that some large company got to take all of your day. I'm not telling you you're wrong. You're absolutely right. They took your whole day just so you could come home, turn on your lights, feel some warmth, and not starve. You feel like you should be able to do that anyway, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. But the closest you're going to get to a life where you don't feel like you wasted your day for your lights, your warmth, and your safety is for you to press in, show that willpower, and do what it takes for you to be able to govern your own 8 hours or however many hours in a day you decide to put into what you love to do. You have to create your own world where you get to govern your time spent. And having the willpower to come home and, yes, work for yourself is the only way you're going to get there. It is going to take a while. You're not going to do it for 2 weeks and see everything you want. And that's the hardest part for me. But it is worth it. And I know it's worth it because for all of the emotions that I've still been having, I'm happier in this first week of January, making these major decisions, doing the things that I love, defying my thoughts, bouncing back, fighting back. I'm happier in the first 7 days of 2026 than I was in all of 2025. And I can say that wholeheartedly. So keep going. Willpower is so difficult. For me, codependency is so difficult. Whatever your roots of your anxiety are, find them. These are 2 of mine. Find them. Work at them. Beat them up They do not own you. They are things you are dealing with, and you will get past them. Now, before I end for the day, I promised you all that I would finish my my weekly scriptural reading from the first week of this book, and I did do that. I am halfway through week 2 of the scriptural readings. Once again, I'm not really digging into this book, but consistency is part of what I am challenging myself with this year, and this is a year-long task. So I'm gonna checkpoint it every week. I met my goal for last week. Oh, the goal was specifically that I finish reading the first week stuff by Sunday, which I did, and it is only Monday, and I'm halfway through week 2 scriptural readings. I have not done the workbook portion yet. Once I've read everything that I want to, because I've just from the way I did it in week 1, I think I like the idea better of getting my reading done before I do the workbook. So I haven't done my workbook yet. I'll have that done by the next episode. I'll have my workbook done and all my week 2 readings. Like I said, I'm halfway there with that. So I did finish that goal for the week, which is great. We're gonna keep this up. I feel really great about the fact that I've been keeping this going. Yes, it's a short amount of time so far, but remember, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, you're still doing it. So you're still meeting that goal of consistency. All right, and finally, as promised at the end of every episode, we will be reading an original poem. This one, I decided to do something a bit more inspirational today because the last 2 poems were more vulnerable expressions of me. But today I would like to give some empowerment for the fact that I feel like I've had the best week of my life in over a year. This is called As a Woman. As a woman, I live for the nourishment of the family, the life force of the future. As a woman, I pray for the protection of moral code, the rejection of sexist strife. As a woman, I bleed simply because I must. As a woman, I cry for the death of true honor, the life of free reigning flesh. As a woman, I yearn for the love of a pure nature, safety of a strong tower. As a woman, I know that I carry with me more than the silhouette shows, more than the music describes. As a woman, I know within me, hope for tomorrow resides. As a woman, I breathe through feelings of lack and inner resentment. As a woman, I succeed. Despite the vote for me to fail, the commitment to stunting my growth. As a woman, I choose to put the divine me first, nurture my best, there forgiving my worst. As a woman, I'll fail till I succeed, cry until I laugh, yearn until I know, bleed as the cycle goes. And in the end, I'll shine. Then I'll fly, then I'll shine, then I'll fly. This was written October 26, 2025. Thank you for watching. Until next time.